Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look, or a revisit, of a Stihl MS311 chainsaw that I posted a video on not that long ago. The customer complaint was that it would start, but it was low on power. It turned out that the ignition coil was completely destroyed by the flywheel, and initially I presented the video in a way that I wanted people to make sure that when they saw a problem, they were looking for the cause of the problem. And in this case, the cause of the flywheel and the coil hitting each other was that there was a crank bearing out and the flywheel moved over and hit the coil. It wasn't because the coil came loose and hit the flywheel. After discussing the situation with the customer and the cost of the coil and the bearings and the labor, we decided that it wasn't going to get fixed. And I heard a little bit about it in the comments section. You know, people are asking me why I didn't just slap a set of bearings in here. Well, it would also have needed ignition coil. And I wasn't too sure about what the flywheel looked like or what else might be going on with this saw. You can see here that this bearing is out for sure. The case is going to be okay, but the bearing's out. So we're going to speed through this disassembly a little bit, and you might notice that I'm kind of sorting the parts and separating them a little bit. That's because this saw is going to get stripped and flipped and sold on eBay. So if you need any MS311 parts, go to eBay, the Greasy Shop Rag store, and you can find them there. So we're going to strip this down and take a closer look at what this might need. If you are an individual doing all the labor yourself and you're going to put aftermarket parts in here, I think that you still might find that the cost is going to be a little higher than what it may appear on the surface. And I'll show you what I mean when we get into this, but even the parts that I'm going to show you that are wrecked, you know, you still got to consider things like tune-up. Does it need a carb rebuild? Does it need filters? What have you. Got our air box off of there. Yikes. We got the carburetor squirting all over us. It's a good fuel tank. Nice shape. That'll be a good part for the eBay store. Gonna yank this muffler off of here. I deleted the part where I was prying those two stupid little caps off of the openings in the end of the muffler where the bolts go. I hate them stupid caps. I mean, I know they do a good job of keeping the dirt out, but sometimes they can be a pain. So, what are we doing here? We're going to pull the cylinder off. This is a clamshell design chainsaw. Can't get at the back two bolts because I have to remove that intermediate wall between the cylinder and the carburetor. Kind of keeps the heat off the carburetor. It's in the way right now. So there's a few screws that hold that in place, and there'll be a few screws that hold the intake in place. So remember, we know we need crank bearings. We know we need an ignition coil. I really haven't found anything else that's trashed yet. But this intake boot, check this out. It's deformed. The bottom of the boot where the carburetor goes is fine, but the upper secondary throttle assembly where that connects, that boot's all deformed. And if you take a look at the carburetor, This is all symmetrical here. There's no reason that that rubber piece should be bent out of shape like that. So I'm wondering, was this thing sucking air? Did that contribute to its failure? Did they have a hard time tuning this saw, fine-tuning it? You know, did it give them grief all its life? Because that, I don't think, just happens after the thing's been assembled properly. Unless someone was in there with a screwdriver poking and prying around. I don't know. Well, now that we got all that stuff out of the way, we can get at these back two bolts and pull this cylinder off of here. It's stuck on there pretty good. It might need a little persuasion. There we go. Yeah. Let's take a closer look at this. All right. So we know our bearings are out. That thing sounds terrible. Let's pull it out of there and take a closer look. Yeah, we got ball bearings hitting the workbench, but we knew that. What I'm really curious about is the piston and the cylinder. And that bearing's definitely gone. Cage let loose and the thing came apart. The seal is still there. You know, he claimed that this thing started. And maybe it did, but maybe his idea of started is just it popped and ran for a second. That lower end rod bearing is what I'm concerned about. Piston doesn't look too bad. I mean, if you're fixing your own saw, you're going to run that. I don't feel too good about it. In fact, that piston and crank assembly went in the scrap metal bucket. See all this metal that's inside of here? All of that metal, look at it, that went around and round in that rod bearing as well. And for that reason, I don't trust the crankshaft, and I won't sell anyone that crankshaft. And then we got these chips out of the cylinder. And yeah, you could probably run that if it was your own saw, but as a dealer, we're not going to run that cylinder or recommend anyone run that cylinder. So now we're talking about a crank and bearings and a different cylinder. Might as well do the piston right away. So let's take a little bit deeper dive into this and see what we really got going on here. So, what did we find? Well, before I forget, it's not sitting here because I already threw it out. We need an ignition coil. It was destroyed. I thought we were going to need a flywheel, but it's just been rubbed on. It doesn't have any broken fins, and we could probably run that. I would feel all right with running that. The crank bearings, we know those are gone, right? There's bearings laying here. The piston's all right. A little beat up on this side, but it's usable. This bearing on the bottom was exposed to a lot of metal, and I don't trust it. Some out there might say, well, just slap some bearings on here and send it, but I don't roll that way. I wouldn't feel good about that. And doing that kind of thing and then having a failure just isn't good for your reputation. We found this intake boot to be deformed. So we got the cost of that boot. And we have the chipping inside the cylinder. Would it run for a while? Sure. Would it start working on those chips and making it worse? Soon? Maybe. Again, I don't trust it. Found that the clutch drum isn't going to last much longer. And I also found that the worm gear, it's got a big chunk out of it. And the oil pump turns really hard. In fact, I think it's locked up. It is locked up. I can't even move it. That's as far as it'll move. So that was an added bonus failure that I didn't even know about. But by looking at the bar, you know, it'd be my guess that this thing probably ran hot at one point. Although I must say, the chain is oily, so I'm not sure what the deal is with that oil pump. So there you go. That's all I have for you on the Stihl MS3 something. What the hell is this thing anyway? MS311. That ate the crank bearings. Thanks for watching. Later.